And I don't mean to be content stealing, so I'm not going to watch like the entire thing, but I did want to watch this video
According to the nation's
because, yeah, this is a big issue.
report card, 40% of Gen Alpha do not have basic reading skills, the highest level in over 2 decades, and as nearly half of all new teachers are already leaving the field, 4th grade reading scores are now falling back towards levels seen in the 1980s, raising the question, why is Gen Alpha facing a full-blown education crisis? Despite decades of technological advancement, you would expect Gen Alpha to be excelling in what should be the greatest time to live in human history.
AI teaching kids in the classroom.
Yet, they're not only struggling to read, but 61% are considered below proficient in math, meaning there are now more 4th graders who know the viral 6-7 trend than can actually explain the difference between even and odd numbers, reflecting a system not shaped by accident, but by decades of decisions that prioritize short-term outcomes over the long-term development of the nation's youth. By the early
You can thank Republicans for this one.
1970s, when the country began formally tracking educational progress, the system was beginning to improve because, for the first time, meaningful investment was actually being directed towards emerging generations. Students were staying in school longer, reading and math scores were stable or rising,
And with the
rates were
cut
climbing,
to
and millions of
education
students
departments, this shit is going to get worse rapidly. Because you got to remember, the kids that were studying now for like their education rates are not the kids that are in preschool right before that reading age. Those kids are going to struggle so much more than the kids we have now in school. There are still a group of Gen Alpha kids that are not in school yet. They're like 3, 4, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, that are not at that reading level yet, not a proficient math level. They wouldn't be anyways. So once those start really getting to the school system, I'm smart because I learned cursive in 2nd grade. Yeah, I think people need to be taught cursive still. You're learning another way to divulge your language. It takes effort for your brain to turn vocal, like communicating, right, with words is something that we evolved to do, but transcribing that in writing takes another level of your brain, and then doing it in another version of writing, basically a second language, which is cursive, it takes another level of that brain. It builds neural pathways that your brain can use to help learn future on, or in further on in your future.
been previously
Critical thinking skills are a desperate need.
Excluded were now receiving a formal education. Even per pupil spending was increasing as states invested in expanding schools, hiring staff, and building a more inclusive system. However, this early
I'm very lucky to go to school. Like I was one of the, like, I genuinely feel like I'm one of the last, like my generation. Gen Z is like probably going to be the last generation for a while that it has like a solid education.
sign of progress was severely disrupted in the early 1980s as President Ronald Reagan entered office with a platform that included eliminating the Department of Education. In response, Secretary Terrell Bell
Literally Reagan, man. Everything ties back to Reagan. Iran, Reagan. You can tie Israel stuff with Reagan as well.
helped assemble the National Commission on Excellence in Education, not to evaluate the system, but to justify the department's existence. The resulting 1983 report, A Nation at Risk, deliberately manufactured a narrative of crisis. Commission insiders, including staffer James Harvey, later admitted that the group began with a predetermined conclusion of widespread mediocrity and then cooked the books, highlighting declining averages and international comparisons, while ignoring the most obvious reality: more students were entering the system and taking those same tests. When the data was actually broken down across all categories, the nation's education system was improving. Yet the report's hyperbolic language, a rising tide of mediocrity, and the claim that mediocre education was equivalent to an act of war by a foreign power dominated public discourse, drowning out the gains of the 1970s and justifying a shift towards standardization, testing, and measurable outcomes over actual.
Which has been cooking us for years now. Standardization has been cooking us for years. That's why when you go to college, nothing is standardized. There are some standardized tests in college, but nothing to this level.
Actually teaching students how to learn, setting the foundation for the widespread crisis now defining Gen Alpha's education. As a result of the cookbook crisis narrative, influential figures began promoting and benefiting from a series of false solutions. Most notably, the system continued rapidly shifting away from phonics, where students learned to read by sounding out words, towards approaches like 3 cueing, where students were
I learned both ways. I learned with phonics and cueing.
encouraged to guess unfamiliar words.
But phonics is super important because it helps build that neural pathway. Why are you watching this? Because it's important to politics. Being able to sound out a word, understand what you're looking at, reading it, being able to make the sound of each individual letter helps immensely in just literacy rates.
Based on sentence structure, surrounding context, or even pictures, rather than actually decoding them.
This is telling you, what do you think this says based off of what's happening in the picture? You're not decoding the language. You're looking at the picture and saying, oh, that cat is chasing the mouse. But Gen Alpha can't vote. Motherfucker, they'll be able to vote in like 10 years. That's not that far away. Literacy rates in Gen Alpha are so important right now because we have an ability to reverse the course that we're going on.
students were encouraged to guess unfamiliar words based on sentence structure, surrounding context, or even pictures, rather than actually decoding them, allowing students to appear fluent while never developing the ability to break down and understand the words on the page.
Something I want you guys to do whenever we do reading stuff, like take a second while you're reading and decode the words. Like you're gonna know what they mean sometimes intuitively, but take a second while you're reading it and decode the words. Like I have a book. Where's the book? I just grabbed a book. I grabbed A Picture of Dorian Gray. If I read at last, see, some of these words are just old words that I actually don't know. Wait. I met you. I saw that you were quite unconscious of what you really are, of what you really might be. There was so much in you that charmed me that I felt I must tell you something about yourself. If you can decode that as I'm reading this, can I read fan fiction? Yeah, reading fan fiction works. As long as, like, manga doesn't count because you're not decoding the words. You're taking context clues. But I have to decode this, that the person was unaware, not knowing what they were doing. The person was realizing, like, oh, maybe this isn't the person I knew, actually.
Lucy Calkins became one of the most influential figures behind popularizing this movement, and despite reading scores drastically
Fuck this bitch, by the way.
declining throughout the 1990s, her curriculum still...
What if it's gay fan fiction? That's gonna double education. That's gonna, like... Gay fan fiction will make you triple literate. That'll make you so literate you could, like, write a Nobel Peace Prize, like, essay. Nobel laureate essay? Is that what it's called?
Reached roughly 16% of all K-2 teachers nationally, and even after the 2000 National Reading Panel strongly endorsed systematic phonics, these approaches remained in place. As Calkins
I'm so glad I learned with phonics growing up.
continued promoting cueing.
What did you learn with growing up? Did you learn with phonics or with, like, contextualization?
Yeah, they stopped phonics for the year before.
They stopped. Ooh, man, you're cooked. Just kidding.
I am.
You can read well.
I know.
Man, that's like a 3-year difference. Yes, I have someone over who's 3 years younger than me, and it's just like, that's fucking wild.
We stopped learning cursive in 3rd grade.
You stopped learning cursive in 3rd grade? What the fuck?
Strategies long after they were shown to be harmful to beginning and struggling readers, contributing to a widespread
Sometimes I think private schools do this better, but I also hate private
most clearly
schools.
seen in Gen Alpha. At the same time, policies like No Child Left Behind further reshaped the incentives within the class.
Oh, dude, kids not getting held back is like devastation. Some kids need to get held back. And it's not, and the unfortunate reality of it is...
No Kid Left Behind fucked up the entire...
Yeah, No Kid Left Behind completely America's education level. Yeah, Common Core as well. Yeah. Well, because of the fact that if students can't be left behind, they don't get the chance to actually get that education that they're missing out on.
Classroom, rather than improving
It's because everything being standardized to help everybody out to make the scores look good is what fucked us over in the long run.
how students were taught, the system began tying school funding and performance directly to standardized test results.
And oh man, school funding being tied to test results has always pissed me off, even since I was like a wee lass.
Forcing teachers and administrators to prioritize whatever could be measured. Over time, this narrowed the curriculum, incentivized teaching to the test, and pulled attention away from
We teach for the test, not for the actual education. No. I was looking at my nephew's homework, and I'm like, oh my god, this is for a standardized test.
foundational skills like decoding, comprehension, and long-term development. But more importantly, it changed how schools responded to failure. Because performance was measured through aggregate test scores, schools were often punished for low proficiency rates across entire student
I remember doing a test, and I was doing poorly in the English comprehension section. And I doubt this would happen now. But I was pulled aside by my teacher. I was told that I was going to have to repeat like the test either next year when I'm in the next grade and then have to do 2 tests, or I have to repeat the test again this year. Not because of the education scores, is they were genuinely worried about me being unable to understand what I was reading.
populations, creating a system
And it helped. It helped. I love reading because of experiences like that.
where struggling students became a liability to overall performance. Retaining students meant those same low scores would be counted again the following year, while also increasing long-term dropout risk. So instead of holding students back and addressing foundational gaps, many schools began pushing them forward, relying on summer programs, test-focused interventions, or simply reclassifying performance to protect overall metrics, leading to decades of compounded decay, where Gen Alpha is no longer progressing through a system built around learning, but instead moving through one that increasingly resembles a glorified daycare. As these policies took
Yep. Man, I genuinely, I don't know what the solution to this is besides completely restructuring public education. I think it should be mandatory for all students to go to public education, and I think it should be overfunded by the government. Schools should have enough money that each teacher can have 3 apples a day for free.
Cold, both a nation at risk and No Child Left Behind, effectively shifted the burden of failure onto teachers, allowing the system to treat them as replaceable cogs rather than skilled.
Yeah, and blaming teachers is fucking ridiculous. That's why teachers get so much fucking harassment nowadays from parents. The fact that parents can go into a school and yell at a teacher for their students' poor performance is a problem.
Professionals. So while Gen Alpha is in desperate...
They shouldn't yell at the kid. I'm not saying that, because some people will misconstrue that. But they should genuinely not, like, it's not the teacher's fault.
need of educational support, teachers now face a pay penalty approaching 27%,
Jesus.
earning significantly less than similarly educated professionals, while real wages have actually declined over the past decade, despite record levels of overall educational spending, forcing over 70% of teachers to hold a second job, with 31% working in roles like Uber or retail just to make ends meet, and with most of them working those jobs throughout the school year while managing classrooms of...
And again, I know it's a double down take, but the fact that teachers have to work second jobs is ridiculous. They should get paid more than any single police officer that we have. They are literally the lifeblood of the country.
23 to 26 students, 77% report their job as frequently stressful, and 52% say they would not advise a young person starting out today to become a teacher. A truly heroic...
Which is insane, because I remember being told to become a teacher. Everybody wanted to be a teacher when I was growing up, but not anymore. No one wants to be a teacher anymore.
Big sign for the nation's future. To see what this actually looks like inside Gen Alpha's education...
And that was kind of a problem even when I was growing up. I was like, oh, I want to be a teacher. And I was told, well, you're not going to make money doing that. You should choose a different profession. What the fuck?
I spoke with an elementary school interventionist with over 20 years of experience in the education system who explained the extra burden that teachers are now facing.
The social emotional is heavier now than it's ever been because structures and supports at home are not as strong as what they've been in the past. And then there's always the time requirement. You know, you're always expected to do something and have it all planned out. But there's so many meetings that must take place. There's no planning time. And so then there's that time burden that shifts to outside of work. And how do you make that happen? Especially if you're a person that's working a second job, especially if you're a person that's running after kids. Like where do you find those spaces? I think those things are really hard on teachers, you know, just trying to keep up.
Now, you may be wondering, if this lack of respect for the nation's teachers and educational decay has been building for decades, why are we only just now seeing it show up with Gen Alpha? It's not like millions of American adults can't read. According to the Barbara Bush...
Yeah, a lot of Americans can't read, and this is going to get much worse in the next 10 years.
Foundation for Family Literacy, 54% of American adults read below a 6th grade level, while nearly half cannot read a book written at an 8th
Please challenge yourself. I need to bring back book segments, because please challenge yourself to read.
grade level. In math, 34% of US adults scored at the lowest levels of numeracy, meaning they can barely do simple addition and subtraction of whole numbers, placing the United States near the bottom among developed countries. So when you combine a system that has been failing generation after generation, an environment where teachers are increasingly overworked and undervalued, and a generation that is the first in human history
VT, thank you for
to
the
have
follow.
never known a world without smartphones, tablets, high-speed internet, streaming services, and social media, what reason...
It should be illegal to give kids tablets. The people must read. They must read. It should be illegal to give kids tablets. I think it's a form of child abuse to give kids tablets. Like, genuinely. Because it cooks them. It fries their fucking brain. Short form content completely fries their fucking brain. You see what it does to adults. If we know what it does to adults with structured neural pathways, what the fuck do you think it's going to be doing to a kid whose brain is soup? Kid brains are soup. They're soup.
Reason would Gen Alpha have to not be facing this crisis? Unlike previous generations who grew up watching their parents read the newspaper, visited libraries, or simply read a book because it was one of their only forms of entertainment, Gen Alpha is growing up in a fundamentally different world. By the age of 2, nearly 40% already have their own tablet, and by the time they reach elementary school, 46% already have their own smartphone. Among children between 8 and 10, 65% are spending at least 4 hours...
By 4, I came across one of your videos and had to come by, and yes, I ended up with my kids on my chat, and their parents need to reel them in so bad. Oh, which video did you come across? Was it the gays for Trump one? That video's been blowing up right now. The fact that 91% of 14-year-olds have a smartphone is ridiculous. Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one's been doing numbers. Like, I should never see a 14 or 13-year-old kid doing a birthday haul with their mom. And if you're a parent who puts your kid on social media like this, welcome to the slammer.
hours a day on social media, often interacting with adult content by the time they turn 11. And while it's easy to point fingers at the greedy corporations, the failing education system, or simply label this just another lazy generation, the reality is that 2-year-olds are being handed tablets. And when 69% of parents say they're addicted to their phones, spending as much time scrolling as they do interacting with their own children, it becomes very difficult for a generation raised in that environment to develop the ability to focus or even self-regulate inside the classroom, especially when they lose access to their device.
In a school setting, it's not uncommon to have classrooms that have a really hot child, and that on a regular basis, that room is having to be cleared so that that child can figure out how to regain their self-control. And so then teachers now having to remove, just say they're below 4th grade, they're now having to remove 21 of their children. 1 to 3 adults are needing to step up to help regulate a child. And so you start looking at the time demands and the lack of learning that's now.
Yeah, dude, I don't know. I think we need to go back to like flip phones. Get rid of social media. Because the fact that 20 or parents are spending as much time on their phones, I usually don't get like the next generation is bad or generation better, but it's scary how it's an actual problem with the evidence this time. It's not that one generation is worse than the other. Like, genuinely hold companies that are doing this accountable. Make this illegal. And the reason why nothing's happening is because companies like Google, Facebook are paying representatives so much money not to do this.
Happening with the other 21 children. I mean, it's not even funny because it happens every day. Some of them are related to children being asked just to work because they have so little attention. That being asked to work is such a cognitive load.
Yeah, more kids are getting ADHD because of social media, and autism because of social media. They can be socially attracted. Granted, a lot of people are born with them, but a lot of people get it socially. That's why there was more autistic people after COVID, because people were not interacting with each other. So social description of autism fit what they were feeling. And it's the same thing with ADHD. It's a social description. It's a social diagnosis.
And when you have a generation
There's no ADHD or autism gene.
already entering school with weaker foundational skills and shorter attention spans, the sudden shift to remote learning during the pandemic resulted in the largest learning loss in modern
Oh my
history.
God, remote learning was fucking cooked. We got so cooked with COVID.
Skipping over some of the most critical years for developing reading, focus, and basic comprehension. And because the system continued pushing students forward, despite lacking those foundational skills, it also widened the gap between the students whose parents were more present during those
Yeah, the fact that we didn't just like hold students back for a year was ridiculous. They should be held back. Just have a gap there.
years, or had the resources to supplement their education, and those who did not. Of the 40% of students who do not meet basic reading requirements, roughly 65 to 70% come from low-income households, with those students being 3 times more likely to be chronically
And the thing is, like, the government doesn't want you to be smart and educated. Why would they? You're harder to regulate.
absent from school. And as this gap continues to widen, collapsing academic performance may be the most commonly discussed metric, but this is also leading to serious forms of cognitive decline, increased dependence on digital devices, and even a resurgence.
I can't
in
imagine how
child
bad
labor.
remote
Oh, it
learning
shows
must
up
have been.
everywhere.
I've already
I mean,
graduated
they're
years before. It was
sometimes
rough.
stealing
I was in
because they
high,
don't
I
have
was
food
in
at
high
home.
school when
And,
remote learning happened.
you know-
And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't do jack shit during high school remote learning. I did not do fucking shit.
No.
Still ended up with a
I guess there
4.0
was a part of me that
GPA.
used to think, oh my gosh, why is he stealing? But then when you start thinking, oh my gosh, he doesn't have food. He's stealing food because he's hungry. Lack of focus, concentration. When you start talking about just the amount of vocabulary they have in place. I mean, I said it earlier that a child that comes from poverty enters the school system a million words behind a middle class child.
And while each of these structural issues
True.
on their own is already creating severe consequences, the nation is now blindly subjecting an already fragile generation to the first large-scale test of how AI will reshape learning. To effectively highlight how concerned we should all be in this pursuit, here is a clip of Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education and co-founder of the WWE, explaining the importance of integrating AI into schools.
I think it was a letter or a report that I heard this morning. I wish I could remember the source, but that there's a school system that's going to start making sure that first graders or even pre-Ks have A1 teaching, every year starting, that far down in the grades. And that's just that's a wonderful thing. Kids are sponges. They just absorb everything. And so it wasn't all that long ago that we're going to have internet in our schools. Whoop. Now, okay, let's see A1 and how can that be?
She's saying A1 and not AI?
So regardless of whether our students are being taught by the most technologically
Oh my God, dude. Oh. I don't know, man.
advanced
What are
tools,
these other segments? ChatGPT, K-shaped, Gen Alpha stealing food, parents need to stop giving their... Should parents be blamed? I think some of the blame should lie on the parents. I don't think all of it should. I think it's a more societally permanent issue than that. I think a lot more of the blame needs to be put onto billionaires and Congress for allowing this to happen. Like, yeah, parents allow this to happen, but you got to remember, a lot of when we're talking about low income students do not have parents at home because they can't afford to be home. If they were home, they wouldn't be able to feed their kids, which, again, is the fault of the government. I don't know, man. I worry. I genuinely am scared for the next 10 years because we will not see the huge ramifications for this for at least another 10. But we're going to do book segments. I'm going to contribute. I'm going to make you all fucking smart because my chat has a bunch of fucking morons in it sometimes. And low income neighborhoods don't have resources to provide additional help in their schools. True. They don't. I was a very poor kid who grew up in a very middle class neighborhood. Like, I got food assistance from the government, but I had a middle class environment because I just got lucky. Like, my mom got fucked when it comes to money wise because like of a bunch of personal shit with like divorces, abusive dad and stuff. But I still got incredibly lucky with the amount. Am I smart? Vi, you don't want me answering that question. I've seen your Twitter post before. You don't need me to answer that. Like, I had a library I could go to. A lot of low-income students and kids don't. And a lot of them live in not the best environments. What do you mean, what? What does that mean? You play Rocket League. You know what that means.